The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here's Brandon.
Welcome back to the Brandon Peters Show. I hope you enjoyed our Urban Legend special last week, but now we're turning our eyes to the ultimate deity of this 90s teen horror, Scream. That's my, yeah. Before we dive in, I'd like to welcome back again, Jessica Alsman.
Hello.
Here we go. Gray, gory McGoon. We're doing horror. There we go.
Nice.
There we go.
Stabsman then?
I thought manslaughter, but
That's
I didn't know.
pretty
I was like, it didn't. Yeah. It was Greg's whole name, but I got there he is. Yeah.
Greg Horry.
Greg Gory. Gory.
Oh, Greg Gory.
Greg Gory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That worked.
There's a young gal that goes by Gory Corey, who is bigger in the horror community. She was like this high school girl that ended up writing for Fangoria and stuff real fast because everybody jumped on the train because she wrote, I forget what article. I think she wrote about something like The Craft or something, and everybody's like, "Oh, we must propel this girl up." But she was really nice. She commented. She read my work and stuff, and really cool stuff. I actually got her permission to link to one of her articles on something I was writing because I wasn't the biggest fan of that Craft remake, but I wanted people to see a perspective of someone a teenager that might actually, this is for me type thing. So that's why I went to there. But
I didn't mind it.
You didn't mind it? All
Maybe
right.
it's because I'm also desperate for just more content. So it's one of those things that no matter what, just give me something and I'll be happy.
I don't remember a single thing about it. I know I watched it.
I did watch it.
Tell you anything about it. Now I'm trying to remember, but I really can't tell you anything about it.
I think
I remember the end. I'm like, yeah.
I think I kept the Blu-ray and I reviewed it. I kept the Blu-ray because I'm like, you know what? My daughter ever gets into these, here's the sequel right for her to find, rather than going not streaming anywhere. Daddy's got you covered. So Scream 1996. Before we dive into the first film, how do we all feel about the Scream franchise as a whole as we go into the first one?
I mean, it's of horror, it's my favorite franchise of all horror genre, or of the horror genre. Because I feel like there is no weak point in it. It may vary over the movies, but unlike every other franchise, I feel like every movie stands on its own and doesn't feel cheapened or weakened, even though there's questionable stuff throughout it. I think it's just really a solid group of movies where I know each of them individually and as a whole, which I can't really do with any other franchise.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's probably my favorite too, just because growing up, it came out when I was young. So it's when I was impressionable / it was new to me. So we're all learning and being entertained at the same time versus the old stuff. And it was not quirky, but it just made a nod to everything horror. So as a fan watching it, or just the audience member, again, very young, probably watched it for the first time, it's like you were in on it with them. I don't know. It was really exciting. Now as you watch it, it's just hilarious. I love it. I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's certain movies that aren't as good maybe, or sometimes you're like, really? That's the killer? That's the motive? That's cool. But I love Sydney and I love Ghostface because you just can't get rid of him. So
yeah,
it's fun. And Matthew Lillard. Hello. I love him. But we can talk about that during Scream.
Gotcha. Yeah, I personally this was the thing you cleared all plans on Friday night when the new Scream came out or something like that. I was really into the Scream movies. when it first came out, and then I kind of lulled. Like, I'm back on a high now after the most recent one. I'm like, I'm back, but I got to a point where I'm like, I guess if this is gone, it's gone, or whatever. Like, I kind of was just like, fine, like with that. I watched the TV show, too, which if you turned your nose at it without watching, you're missing out on something pretty decent. I didn't think they did a pretty good job. But yeah, so I'm currently back on the train of like, yeah, make more of these, keep going, let's do this with Scream 6. I am hyped for. I think Greg, you and I had a lot of conversations with Scream 5. I was very hesitant about.
Yeah.
And then like after, I'm like, let's do this, let's run with these kids. So that's where I'm currently at with it. I was very loved, and we're talking posters on the wall. Scream 2, the home video poster, with Liev Schreiber, not Jerry O'Connell. That was an odd switch that they made when it went to home video, because Jerry O'Connell was on the theatrical poster for that, and then when it came to home video, they put Liev Schreiber there.
Did they ever say why? Or do they just assume everybody knows by then? So let's put Liev.
I don't know. It's a really odd change.
Going to survive, so then let's just put him on the poster.
I don't know.
Spoiler.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a German poster for the first one. Bought soundtracks, all that stuff. So we'll get into that. But I was heavy into the Scream and horror buds, and then I also, some of my first movies when I was making in high school, I made there was a Scream parody, and then I made a Scream 2 before Scream made it. So I'm like an Italian knockoff guy from the 80s, but made another one. And at the time we named it the sequel to Scream, which was a working title for Scream 2. And then it ended up not being called that. But and then, yeah, so I made some Scream parodies when I was in high school as well. So I liked the movies. But let's talk about the first one from 1996, Scream.
You're not scared, are you? Someone has taken their love of fear one step too far. We know you're not the killer. Solving this mystery. Everybody's a suspect! Is going to be murder.
Who are you? The question is, where am I? We all go a little mad sometimes.
Scream, the new thriller from Wes Craven, rated R.
Directed by Wes Craven, written by Kevin Williamson, starring Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Skeet Ulrich, Rose McGowan, Matthew Lillard, Jamie Kennedy, Drew Barrymore, Henry Winkler, W. Earl Brown, Liev Schreiber, Linda Blair, and the voice of Roger Jackson. Some notable players in this that I want to highlight, in addition to the cast, director and writer, is Marco Beltrami, who will do the scores from Scream 1 to 4, which will get reused in Halloween H2O. This one, Mark Irwin is the cinematographer. This is the only one he does. And then edited by Patrick Lossier, who goes on to, he also edits Halloween H2O. He was kind of the Dimension Films editor guy, but he'd go on to make My Bloody Valentine 3D, Drive Angry. He became kind of a prolific director himself, starting out editing for Wes Craven and such. I believe he edited New Nightmare too. I can't remember that, but like he's a fun guy. Him and Todd Farmer were a good pair for a bit, writer director pairing. The movie focused on a year after the murder of her mother. A teenage girl is terrorized by a new killer who targets the girl and her friends by using horror films as part of a deadly game. Up top note for my listeners. Yes, last year in January, Out Now with Aaron and Abe, I did a commentary for the original Scream, which you can, if you want to go back, you can find that on this stream, as well as Out Now with Aaron and Abe's. And yes, I'll probably repeat things I said then, but that was a year ago and you haven't listened or maybe didn't listen. So here we are, the original Scream. So when did everybody first see Scream? Greg?
So I was literally trying to figure this out in my head. I know I didn't see it in theaters because I was very young, but I know it was rented at some point shortly after its release, because if it came out in 96, I was still living at the house that my parents were in, like while they were getting a divorce, and then they separated. And the reason why I know that is because the house that I lived in was very similar to Casey Becker's, and we had like the doors that led to the pool and the thing. And I just remember being terrified if I turned on the patio light, I would see somebody like tied to a chair
Oh,
in my backyard. So because we had the pool, we had all that going on in the childhood home, and then downsized shortly after that movie when they split up and all that. So I saw it at some point after it came out at home, being terrified. I don't think my parents were there when I watched it for the first time, because I just vividly remember not being able to walk downstairs for a very long time after that movie came out at night, because I just was scared that somebody was gonna throw a chair through our glass doors that led to our backyard patio. So that is that. I don't remember the exact dates, but I just know it had to have been around that time.
gotcha, Jessica.
The first time I was too young to watch it in theater, plus movie theater where I grew up was, like 30 plus minutes away. So my mom and I, it was just us at home, and we rented it on pay-per-view through the cable, whatever company it was. I don't know if it was like 96 or early 97, but it was way before everyone knew what happened, because no one my age had really seen it. And it was amazing because the whole time, like my mom is what got me into scary movies. She always watched them. But the whole time, just trying to guess who it was so exciting. And I remember the phone rang while we were watching it, and it scared the crap out of us.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if we even had caller ID at that time or not, but it just like, yeah, we were both shook, which is so funny now, whatever, back when you could, use a home phone and pick it up at the same time. Anywho, it was
Yeah.
a lot of fun. And then after that, I was the one that as soon as you could buy it, had it on VHS and burned that thing up at every sleepover, because I'd have the girls over. They didn't ever get to watch scary movies. And so that's where everyone come to my house to watch all the scary movies. And I probably memorized, played it over and over, fell in love with Matthew Lillard. Oh, he can live me alone. That doesn't work, does it? Oh, sorry. Now he's married, and I totally respect that. That's cool. It's cool. But
There you go.
10-year-old, 11-year-old Jessica was like, hormones. I love him. I must print off every picture of him online now and pull out every Bop magazine picture or Teen Beat magazine picture, Tiger Beat of like anyone from the Scream cast. Like if it was Nev Campbell, it was getting ripped out. So they went up on the wall next to, the Dawson's Creek kids or JTT or
Oh my
Kevin
god.
Salwa. So their photos were all over my wall. And I loved Rose McGowan. I thought she was
same.
like such a feisty character when I was watching it. I love Sydney, but Tatum was my favorite. And so in elementary school, whenever you had like write a story or tell a story, I would use Tatum as my female lead. And I remember in 5th grade, my teacher circled Tatum and said, "Not sure that's a real name." And I wanted to be like, "Bitch, watch Scream."
Or Paper Moon starring
Yeah, I was gonna
Tatum
say,
O'Neal.
the actual Tatum O'Neal Oscar. Like,
And I was
come
just
on.
like, what do you mean it's not a real name? I'm a creative child. If I make up a name, I make up a name anyway, hypothetically. How dare you say that to me? Anyway, so that's how Scream affected me.
So like you were in love with the guy who killed his ex-girlfriend and his current girlfriend. Loved the name Tatum because he could scrunch me in a garage too, right?
At
Is
the
that-
time, I wouldn't realize I would also have attachment issues and be attracted to toxic relationships.
Oh, okay.
A
Okay.
la Megan Fox.
There you go. So my first, I was big horror dude. Okay. And I was coming up then the 90s before Scream was a wild place in horror. Not wild, but kind of like it's considered lame. There are some very big gems here and stuff. But I was there for it. Like that was all my new horror. Like I'd gotten into horror like somewhere around 89, 90, like in there, and I was eating it up. I was doing all the work. And then the Scream movie came out and I saw it like, and it did not look like it was for me. It looked like it was for everybody that picked on me at school. Like all these like Party of 5 girls in it and this guy and all this. And we know it's scary movies. And I was like, no. And I passed it. I didn't go see it until like January. It came out in December. And my mom, like people told me, you should see Scream. I'm like, I'm too cool for Scream. I was fucking horror hipster, gatekeeper. And then my mom wanted to go see Scream. I was like, what the? I was like, I'll go with you. Sure, we'll go. You want to see? It's a horror movie. Kids like it, right? I was like, yeah. My mom would not go. So I went to go see Scream, and woof, it was for me. Whoops. And I was like over the moon for it. My mom was mortified by the movie for some reason. She, like, Scream 2 came out. I'm like, you want to go see it? No, I had my fill the first one. I was like, all
Was
right.
it the gore?
I don't know. But she did. She said it was good, but she's like, that's enough. I don't. Yeah.
Aw.
So, yeah. So for her, it all ended in that kitchen at Stu's house. Technically, that's where it still ended right now. But so I was like, and it like charged my horror fuel even more. Like I was, and then I remember, so the summer it came out for rental at the VHS stores in June of 1997 because it came out the same day. It was a Tuesday that I got my wisdom teeth pulled and I had dental surgery on another tooth in my mouth. Well, I had to have my wisdom teeth pulled. I had a baby tooth that needed pulled. I had a tooth in my gum over the wrong tooth that needed moved over. End of story. My mom went and got me Scream day of, so I could have that for a while. I was sitting there being like, the whole weekend. So I had Scream, VHS. I also discovered Jessica pay-per-view. So pay-per-view was Scream. My friend, he got it off pay-per-view and he recorded it through the night. The second recording of it, of like 3, he goes, dude, you got to come see this. I'm like, what? And he's like, there's like, it's Scream, but like Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson are like talking over it. They're like talking. It's like the first time I ever experienced a film commentary, and they put those on pay-per-view. So like in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m., it caught a commentary of them with it. So we had so he made a copy of it for me. So I had a commentary. And then in Suncoast, they sold a version of Scream that was 2 VHSs, and the second one was a commentary.
Oh,
So you could get
wow.
a 2 things. I ordered it special edition, so I get the widescreen edition on VHS.
Ooh.
So I got that one. I had to go to Suncoast for that. So yes. So Scream, yeah. So Scream introduced me to commentaries for films before DVD. They were a Laserdisc thing, but my parents didn't buy Laserdisc. I wanted it. They're like, I ain't buying that. So yeah, even though I buy them now for artwork, but I still don't have a player. So yeah, it was Scream, and I was, yeah, for the sequel, I was all in, way to go with everything. But yeah, so that I was originally had my dukes up with Scream and won me over. A little bit like the most recent one. But yeah, so there's that. I also want to talk about before the poster for this movie. It started a trend as well.
Oh yeah.
The floating heads became a thing because of Scream. Not the first poster. The first poster was just the Drew Barrymore face. It was the hey, we're doing really well, like we're making a second marketing push thing with all the floating heads with it. Do you remember that we had Drew Barrymore prominently on it, and everybody. The funny thing was, Skeet Ulrich had like a goatee on it.
Oh.
You look it up. Look at the Scream poster. He's got facial hair on it.
That man is so uncomfortably attractive. The more I watch Scream, the more I don't think I realized how attractive he was when I first watched the movie.
Because everybody's like, he looks like Johnny Depp. He looks like Johnny Depp. Do you look like Johnny Depp? He looks like Johnny Depp. He looks like Johnny Depp.
So much more attractive than Johnny Depp to me.
He's even introduced similarly to Johnny Depp, as Johnny Depp was in Nightmare on Elm Street, going into Nancy's room through the window. Here he is at Sydney's going through the window.
It's like they know what they're doing.
It's kind of like they know what they're doing.
He does have the goatee.
So,
and his hair is much longer.
Yeah. Anecdote to that. My senior year of high school, I was in Hello Dolly. That was our spring musical. And my my last one, and played Barnaby Tucker, the third male lead in it. I put on my Sunday clothes. And so there, when you walk into our auditorium at our school, we had like a wall of like the seniors, because seniors graduating and stuff. And so Barnaby Tucker, I had a little goatee, I had a goatee or whatever, and I had to be clean cut for the role, because the guy playing Cornelius looked noticeably younger than me, but I had to like try to make myself look younger. But I had my goatee, like, you shaving? I'm like, no, because I wanted the senior wall where they took that picture to have me like that, because I wanted to look like Skeet Ulrich on the Scream poster, where it's like, he doesn't look like that in the movie. He doesn't, like, I didn't want to look like, I wanted to look like two different people, and it was because of that Scream poster I did that. It's a
I
very
don't think
deep,
I ever even questioned it.
it's like a deep
that
cut
movie
branded.
poster.
Yeah.
That's so funny though. You're like, I'm gonna look like Skeet. He was cool.
Scream.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we can talk about the movie itself. One question. We know it's one of the very best, if not the best, horror movie of the 90s. But is it one of the best teen movies of the 90s, or the best teen movie of the 90s?
Oh.
Well, you're going up against She's All That.
Can't hardly
10
wait.
Things I Hate About You, unless that was
Clueless.
2000.
Clueless.
Yes.
Clueless.
Sorry, that's my female. Oh,
I mean, like,
damn.
You're going, yeah, American Pie. Yeah. Yeah,
Now and Then. That was nice.
but if you
I mean, I would say it's up there with Clueless, but like
Mhm.
in the genre wise, like is when I think 90s teen movie, I immediately jump to Clueless because I don't know.
You're thinking
if
more comedies, right? But
Yeah.
Scream counts. I think Scream is comedy.
Oh, it
Scream
is.
is horror, like, and it's got that young cast and everything. Like, it fits the bill.
And they're just so cool. Like Scream made horror cool, I feel like, again, because I was young when it came out. I was in elementary
Mhm.
school when it came out. And I know it was talked about when I was in elementary school, but my like being familiar with horror before Scream, I watched like the Tales of the Crypt series, which I
Mhm.
was allowed to watch.
Yep.
And I don't really remember much else about horror before I watched Scream because I didn't really care about it. And then I saw Scream, and then I was like, what is this magical thing that I
Yeah.
like it welcomed me into? But then other horror movies didn't really at the time like satisfy that like itch that Scream gave to me, or
Yeah.
like brought me to, because I guess it did have that teen element that I guess 80s horror did, though, in a different sort of way.
They use recognizable faces, like
Yeah.
actual stars of shows. The 80s ones were using like people who were like guest starring on Growing Pains or something. They weren't like the actual people. They were like, you know, like, well, maybe they'll get a sitcom one of these days, but they can come over here and be on Friday the 13th part 3 right now, or, you know.
But it was teens though, like they
Yeah.
were, but this felt like more organic and more natural. Like I want to be this group of friends. Like I want to be the one to like tell people to watch out.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I don't know.
Well, I think Williamson's up there with some of the important writers that changed the game in the night. Like he's there with Tarantino, Kevin Smith, Richard Linklater, Joss Whedon, and there's Kevin Williamson. People started talking differently in movies because of these guys in the 90s.
I will say Dawson's Creek, though, a little too wordy for my elementary school behind. I was like, why are they talking so fast and using such big words? I don't even know half the time what they're talking about. But I tried to keep up with it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Until I got older. But yeah, just speaking of Kevin. But no, I think it is kind of a teen movie now that you think
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah, it is.
It just takes away the romance. Instead of romance, it's horror. But then you still have that comedy. Otherwise, I feel like it's usually a rom-commy.
Well, you got her
thing.
you got Sydney's worrying about losing her virginity to
Yeah.
Billy, and you got, yeah.
That's American Pie right there. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
American Pie is all about virginity, and so is Scream until he starts to kill people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in reality, it really is more realistic than a lot of teen movies, although to the extreme of murder. But I guess just a lot of people really have bad times with their first relationship. And I guess, Scream highlights that just in the ultimate way of he's trying to kill you.
Right. And Williamson's a big John Hughes guy. Like he's a big fan, like that's a big inspiration. And so he wanted to do like The Breakfast Club meets Halloween. And then he'd go on to do like The Breakfast Club meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers when he does The Faculty. He's got Dawson's Creek as his Breakfast Club 90210. Like everything he does has some sort of John Hughes-esque, and that's what's kind of helping. He's like, why can't these kids, let's take those movies, write those first, and then add horror to it later. Maybe that helps with what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, everything felt natural for the kid, like what Sydney was going through and the way she was handling it
Mhm.
felt natural of like what a teenage girl would be like to flash her boobs the way she did, or like something like that. Like it was coy, it was cute, it felt like what a teenager would do.
Mhm.
Maybe not as clever like in real life. It would be a little bit messier, like they pulled it off like more structured, but I think the sentiment was there and genuine, and the cast believed what they were doing, but they also looked like they were having fun. It's one of those rare
Oh, yeah.
movies you can watch and you're like, everybody's just having a great time here. Like they all want to be here and they all probably are really friends. And yeah, so
No, I get, yeah,
that shows
1000.
through in the movie.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, I don't know where we're gonna break new ground on screamed conversations that have been had here, but
Well, can I ask you a question, Brandon?
Yeah.
Since you have probably watched the commentary version a few times, is there anything that stands out the most that you learned watching the commentary with them? Because I had never seen the commentary.
well, I'll say this: not Kevin, but Wes Craven's one of the best commentary directors you can find, and all his movies sound like they are the best sets to be on. Like everybody sounds like they're family, friends. The one commentary of his I've listened to over and over is Red Eye, because I worked on that DVD and I never got tired of listening to his commentary on that. He's just because he was a professor first, so he's got this astute nature to him, and is able to present and he's very sympathetic to the student, that type of thing. I have a friend who his parents had a meeting about a book publishing with Wes Craven, and he told them about it, and they're like, he's like, wait, Wes Craven? He's like, that? Well, they showed a picture, and he's like, yeah, that's the horror. Like, oh, he didn't come off as that type of guy. He seemed like a teacher or something. Like, yeah, because he they had no idea that that was the same Wes Craven that made like Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream and all this stuff. But this commentary, they point out some little things. I haven't listened to it in ages, so I can't remember. I do remember one of the things I think they pointed out that was one of their hints to the killers was in the Principal Himbry scene, where it's after the guy plays the prank on Sydney, like running through the halls, and he unmasks, and he's got two boys there that is telling you what's going to happen at the end, that they put in there and like for just to have fun, but nobody like really picked up on that. But it was supposed to be like, look, that's what's going to be at the end. Two guys like that. So that was one. I think that was in the commentary. But yeah, no, he's just lots of fun stuff. He points out himself playing Fred the janitor. He's like, hey, Fred. But yeah, there's stuff like that that's fun. Like Linda Blair is the random reporter. But yeah, every time I go back to the original Scream, Dewey just climbs the ranks of greatness, because this is like a genius comedic performance. But I remember the first time I saw this movie, it's like, I don't know if I trust this guy. But it's all nerves. That's all it is. Like, he's nervous to be around Courtney Cox or Gail Weathers. He's nervous to be, but it comes off like, But no. So when you can appreciate Dewey as the goofball, like the comedic genius, like this time I watched it before. I picked up on a funny thing here with Dewey, where Linda Blair, when Sydney goes back to school the morning after she's attacked, Linda Blair comes right out after she gets out of the car. She's like, what are you gonna do? People need to know. Da, 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 da. And I heard Dewey off screen because he comes push her off. He's like, she's just trying to get herself an education. Or something like that. I was like, oh gosh, that's so silly.
I wonder how much like David Arquette, if he ad-libbed it all, or if his was just like you gave him the lines and he could do it in like 1 to 2 takes, because he knew he could just play that goofball, like nervous, didn't understand, but trying to pretend like he understands, like that vibe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. There's the genius scene, like when he meets privately with the sheriff, and he's smoking a cigarette, and Debbie's licking an ice cream.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, Yeah, and that's where they're trying to make the sheriff a suspect by showing his boots, because everybody's got those boots.
Everybody's got the boots.
Everybody's got the boots.
Ugh.
Did the commentaries, I forgot now, so I'm wondering if you picked up on it. There's only one scene that is like questionable, and like, because I've watched so many videos of like which killer did which kill type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
There is, and like where the killers would be, but there is that quick moment before the party when they're at the before the curfew sets into effect, and they're at like the mini mart or whatever it is, and then you get like glimpses of the killer. Like, I just feel like that just doesn't.
It's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's like, why would he be out in the costume?
Yeah, that to me, that's the only thing about the movie that I just kind of question of, was there something there that might have been cut, or was there something bigger to it?
Mhm.
Or like, why was that put in there? Because I feel like it was too obvious, and it just went against. I mean, I would
Well-
assume it'd be Stu who would have done it, because Stu would be like, I'm out the day job. Like, I just
Yeah.
feel like his character would be kind of having fun with it, but it just.
I
is-
think so. To be the Doyleist of the situation,
Okay.
it's because this movie goes for a very long time with nobody getting killed, so that adds to stuff. So
Well, is that when Henry Winkler would have got killed?
he does get killed in
They
there,
find him.
but between the opening kill to there's a Sydney attack, but
Mhm.
nobody dies, and then
Right,
Henry Winkler gets killed, and then for the longest time nobody else dies. So
right.
they add these things of like being watched in the bushes and
Mhm.
in the convenience store, and then like they add, there's Sydney, the bathroom scene, which is
Yeah.
maybe it's probably the weakest moment in the entire film. Is that like what? Okay.
Oh,
But-
is that when she also hears people talking about her bubble butt boyfriend Billy? I
Yes.
can't even say that.
Yeah.
Sydney's bubble butt boyfriend Billy.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, there's that. I mean, it's a movie. It's not perfect. It's fun. It earns everything it does.
I
Honestly.
remember being scared the first time. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
you never know who it's gonna be. You think you know, and then you're like, well,
hmm
he was there. Never once did I ever think there were two killers. Never thought it possible till it happened. Is
For-
this the first horror movie or a slasher where it had two killers?
yeah.
Is
Well,
it?
not like, but like done this way, no. Or-
There's just before dawn had two kill. That was the surprise of that, is that there were two of them. Sorry if anybody hasn't seen just before dawn.
haven't, but
There's a
it's okay.
couple in the 80s that had two killers. So it wasn't the first. But it's certainly it certainly is the most memorable, the first big, because a lot of the slashers you get into that, they're independent productions, maybe a studio put it out in a region or something like that. So like widespread audience wise, this one is like the first. I would
Yeah, and
say.
a lot of my friends like loved Scream, but they never watched Friday the 13th or any of those 80s
Mhm.
slashers. So to like, well, most people was like, oh, this is brand new. I mean, they knew
Yeah.
of, your Jason, but just even like watching, gosh, even taking that quiz the first time with my mom, we're like,
Mhm.
it's Jason. We're like, oh, son of a gun, it wasn't Jason, was it? It was his mom. Well, we're
It was his
stupid.
mom, and the fifth one wasn't Jason either. So
True.
yeah, there's that. But it's certainly the one, yeah, that the one that hit the best or made that people saw that you can
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So I mean, with that, but
I mean, it's just interesting that you watch this movie, and the more times I've watched it, and I actually forgot to say, I did finally get to see it in the theaters last year because it was
okay.
for the 25th anniversary of it. So I did get to have a theatrical experience with it all these years later.
Mhm.
Last year, and it was just as good on the big screen. It still holds up to me, although yes, it's dated with the phones and other things. But I watched this movie obviously knowing very well who the killers are
Mhm.
and what's going to happen, and it's so obvious, but then we're still not going, it's obvious while we're watching it. Like that first time you don't really think it's very obvious, but then you rewatch it and you're like, they're literally basically telling you they're the killers the whole movie almost.
Who did you think when you first saw it? Did you have any guesses?
I didn't think it would have. I didn't think there would be two, but I wanted to think it was the boyfriend. I really did want to think it was Skeet, because I just felt like. But then I was like, no, that's too obvious. So I did believe it was him, but also thought it had to have been somebody older for some reason. I didn't think it would have been one of that friend groups doing it.
Yeah, I when I first saw, I thought it was Matthew Lillard. I was half right.
Wow.
I
You
was
were half right.
I was half
Really?
right. I never knew two people would do it, but I figured he was randomly gone and like he didn't fit with time. Like he was randomly showing up and he left for a chunk of the film. And I'm like, what happened to that guy? And then he shows up at a locker later on when the prank scene happens. And I'm like, yeah, he hasn't been here for, they keep like, he makes it, he makes himself after their introductory scenes. He's not there a lot, but he likes to make himself known when he is. So you think they kind of think he's there, but like, it wasn't like I know it's him, but I'm like, I think that might be it. And yeah. And the way he played when him and Randy were outside, I was like, oh yeah. Cause he was way trying to sell it harder, but yeah, I was half right. Cause I was like, Billy, I'm like, man, it's way too, I thought like, this guy's way too obvious, right? Like
Right.
way too, like,
But I said,
and then I thought he died. Like I really thought I was like, oh, that's genius. Like right when
when you think it was him, and then you kill him, and then it's not. But like that's the other thing is Stu, though, when you rewatch it, I mean, his performance is perfection. But he's so unhinged.
Yeah.
Like that character. But then I sat there and said, hold on, I don't want to judge too quickly because I feel like I'm that guy in high school. Like I don't want people to think that I would be like, what's so scary? People are dying. Like I don't want to be like I could be very loud and weird. So like the scene in the video rental place when Stu's that scene is so well done.
That's the giveaway. Like we should have got it from right there, but we don't.
And that's the thing is like I feel like in that situation, I would have been the Stu in high school in that video scene talking to Randy. Like that's how I would have talked to Randy. So then I was like, I don't want him to be the killer because then I don't want to be like potentially viewed as a killer just because I'm quirky.
Right.
But like not as unhinged. Well, depends on the day, I guess. But like, I don't know. So again, both killers were kind of obvious that there was no one else that it could have been unless you didn't see them the whole movie.
Right.
And
Sydney's
it was like
dad.
a surprise at the end.
Yeah.
She could never find her dad.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, and then they don't really bring it up too much, except that they were out
He's
looking
prime
for him.
suspect. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Which that actually made sense for the movie. Like, okay, the dad killing off teens like that, but then why kill off the principal? So
Right.
that kind of shifted it too. When the principal was killed, you kind of go, all right, I doubt this is an adult doing this now. Like, why would an adult go after the principal? But it's still like a fun ride to go on. So
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things I didn't notice till like many years ago, that's one of the best things ever is when the very opening, not the opening scene, but the first, it was Sydney in her room and Skeet Ulrich comes in the window. The song playing is a slow acoustic cover of Don't Fear the Reaper by Gus Black.
yeah.
It not only continues the Halloween homage, but it foreshadows Billy Loomis as the killer. Like,
Gosh.
it's right there, but it sounds so sweet. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's Don't Fear the Reaper. Wait a minute. Like, but it's there. It's so subtle, but it's genius. Like, and he's creeping on there. It's brilliant. It's like, there's so many touches of genius in this movie. Like, it's insane.
The little eggs. Close call. Is always
And that's why I fell down that rabbit hole of watching these videos, because after the fact, when you start making those connections and you pick out those little clues, you know, a lot of that has to be intentional and how many people are going to pick up on it in the moment. And then you appreciate the movie so much more when you know how much thought genuinely went into it.
Right.
Where a lot of horror movies, and that is the thing about horror movies, they're typically a lot of teen horror movies, especially, well, horror movies in general and a lot of teen ones, they're made for fairly inexpensive, like they're fairly inexpensive to make. They're quick to make, and nowadays, and probably thanks to Scream, they're gonna bring in an audience because people just want the content to do it. I don't know how much that was before Scream, but now I'm like, oh, it's a teen like the horror movie, low budget thing, I'll watch it just because I feel like I need that fix until I have quality again.
Well,
So
it was a risk. This movie, like Weinstein's went on, it was called Scary Movie at the time, and the script was okay. They had Wes Craven. Wes Craven was like not at his high point here. He had just had Wes Craven's New Nightmare bombed. I can't remember if Vampire in Brooklyn was before this or after. And the dailies, the Weinsteins were hating they're like, what? And Patrick Lussier saved Wes Craven's job. He cut together the opening scene of the film, and they were like, oh fuck, keep making this. And then not Harvey Weinstein, it was the other Weinstein, Bob, made them change the movie to Scream, the title to Scream. So that was his contribution. But it also didn't do very well opening weekend, and then had, like, to put it in modern terms, it was like the Greatest Showman of its time. It built, it came back, it became this surprise huge hit as the weeks went on and the word of mouth kept going. So, like, yeah, it almost wasn't, like, it was almost a disaster. As good as people would have said, like, the opening weekend was like, well, I think we're done. That's it. It was one of those openings, and then boom, huge hit. But yeah, no, there's a quality, there's a thoughtfulness. It's because there's a guy who, like, gave a shit about these things. And it wasn't a higher script where he had to flip it around. It was one of these dream projects he was working on that got picked up. So he had been working at it and at it and at it to have his way. And unfortunately, even as much money as he's make, the Weinsteins don't believe in his shit. Like, it's insane where it goes, like, because you can tell the Williamson touches, because he knows what he's doing. Like, the opening here to this one is When a Stranger Calls. Like, that's what it's kind of picking off of. There'll be another one in the next one, and then Scream 3, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what horror movie is this? You know, when we get there. Scream 4, there's a hodgepodge of the evil of Scream 3 creeping into Scream 4 with stuff, and we'll get there with that. And then obviously the new one is an homage back to this one. So that makes sense with what they're doing. But this one and the second one, clearly there's a love letter to horror in there that's not going to be present after them as much. But yeah, so this is why maybe he had the time, whereas, like, I Know You Did Last Summers don't, Urban Legends don't, but, like, not to say that those aren't quality projects, but there's clearly Kevin Williamson lacking from the things that aren't Kevin Williamson at this time, because The Faculty's a really good one, as well. But there seems to be more, I don't know if there's more care, but there's more money getting thrown at these. But yeah, you're right, Greg. They try to flip these around really fast, like tight shooting schedules and
this one, I think that's why Scream holds up, because there is that level of detail in every aspect of the movie, on which most horror movies don't actually get that treatment. And this does, as you pointed out, like, just the subtle nods to the music and the subtle nods to the history of horror. There's an appreciation there. Like, you can't break the rule. Like, what's the whole thing about, like, people in writing and all that? Like, you can't break the rules unless you know the rules, type of thing.
Yeah.
And it's very clear. Well, I mean, and he actually made a full point through Randy.
Yes.
There are rules, and then he breaks them. Like, that's the thing, is he like hits you over the head with, like, the obvious, but then creates a world where you just want to be a part of it, which is kind of weird to say when you're going, this is a world where people are dying left and right, but you want to be a part of this world.
And they're all like, woohoo!
I mean, well, and you'll get to that in Scream 2, where I mean, that opening scene, like, well, we're not there yet, so I'll wait to talk about Scream 2 on that opening scene, which I love, but it's weird. When you really think about it, it's weird. But yeah, no, I think there's just the thoughtfulness of it. And you even forgive the fact that, like, Tatum dies in the doggy door in the garage door, which couldn't happen. It's been disproven. Like, it's like the whole Titanic thing. Like, could Jack fit on the door? Like, he could have lived, or he could have, whatever would have happened. This one, could she have gotten crushed in the garage door? No, actually, she couldn't have. But you forgive it because it's so fun, and you knew she was gonna die, so I'm glad they made it more interesting than just the typical like slice of dice and call it a day. It was a better picture to leave her in the driveway that people ended up seeing. But for the longest time, I struggled with understanding the blueprint of that house and wondering why the front door, I guess it's just where I grew up, because garage doors are always very close to the front door of a house. So I'm wondering how no one saw her body hanging there for so long, because the garage is like on the other side of the house compared to where the front door is.
If he was in a neighborhood, it'd be forgivable, because there are neighborhoods, like my parents lived in a neighborhood where the houses, when they were built, they had to have the garage facing to the side and away from the front door or something like that. But he's not in a neighborhood. He's out wherever.
I'm familiar with that. Like that was a new concept for me, because where I grew up and everything at the time, it was always just like a line of houses, and you had like your garage and you had your front door right next to it, and it all lined up. So for the longest time, I just didn't understand how this house was built and why the garage would be on the side.
Right.
So and until I had it on DVD and I rewatched it a few times, I actually would pause the movie when it did aerial shots of the house, just so I could kind of get a better understanding to go like, this is a real place. Like I know they're using an act, and you can and again, before Scream, the new one comes out, they are doing a stay in the Scream house Airbnb.
Oh wow.
Again, which they did last year, and they're doing it again this year. So the house is a real fully functional house, and it just, for me, has a weird layout that the garage is on the side, that no one would notice somebody hanging there when
that
there's
probably went into their, like, oh, we could do something with the garage because no one could see it coming out.
Well, there's a curfew. No one's out and about, maybe. And they're playing music so loud, they're drunk. No one notices until, they notice. But heck, I remember growing up, even as a kid, looking at every doggy door thinking, can I fit through that? I already think I'm too big. I literally thought I was too big pretty much since, 10 or 11. I was like, no woman can get through that. How does she think she could get through that? But yeah.
Who is the first one to discover Tatum's body?
Sydney.
Well, I thought it was Sydney. I was just gonna say,
because she jumps off the roof into the boat, lands, looks up, and is like, ah.
That's what I didn't know if there was another. Well, the other thing that always makes me laugh about this movie, and it explains a lot too about like Dewey, is like that's Dewey's sister.
Yeah.
So it's just, and it explains why Dewey's the way he is with women, because Tatum is such a strong personality.
Yeah.
So I just imagine like Dewey just kind of being dominated by his little sister, like growing up, that made him just kind of very intimidated and uncomfortable around women, because she really puts him in his place a lot of the times and like kind of belittles him. But yet it's still
like he only became a cop so his sister would have to listen to him.
Exactly. Like,
Which is why I thought he did it. Like,
you treat me like I'm a man of the law.
Yeah.
Hello.
It's a very cute dynamic, despite the fact that it's kind of toxic when you think about it. Their relationship is not very good, but but they pull it off in a very sibling bickery kind of loving way, which it is really sad that Dewey does have to do with it. But I feel like Tatum's death kind of, we don't really like, I don't feel like Dewey struggles with Tatum's death too much later on. Like I don't think it really resonates as much as it would later on in movies, I guess.
No, you're right.
Like it's acknowledged, but like,
well, I think he instantly moved to Sydney to replace that. That's kind of what I get. We missed some of the instant aftermath, but he had Gail, a newfound relationship with Gail at the times, protecting, like looking after Sydney. Like that's what his duty or whatever.
Sydney did become kind of the I guess that really was it. That's true. That is his coping mechanism, was basically channeling his energy on Sydney, and that made him now a key player. So yeah, had Tatum not have died, then Dewey would not have been a key player, because Sydney wouldn't have had her support team.
Which I do agree. I was suspicious of Dewey, Jessica, when I first saw it, because I'm like, oh, he's going to be that guy that like straightens up and is like, I did it. The goofy thing
he was going to solve the case. He was going to come out and be this big hero. People would respect him after, because he conveniently was holding the mask.
Yeah.
He's like, but everyone's like, maybe it's Dewey. Or by everyone, I mean, my mom.
But you're watching back, you're like, oh, he's just good. Like,
he's just goofy.
Dewey, what's she doing here? She's with me. Like, I was 24 for a whole year.
Isn't that what they did? Isn't that what they did with Scary Movie though? The spoof one of it, like, wasn't the Dewey actually really cool by the end of it?
Yeah.
No,
and he was the
they-
killer.
Yeah,
Well, it was
Officer Doofy.
they did
Yeah.
a parody of what's the movie Kevin Spacey won the Oscar for it.
yes. Usual Suspects.
Usual
no.
Suspects. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
they were doing a parody of that for the Deputy Doofy.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
that's
like,
disturbing.
but
I'm cleaning my room. It's just, that's really. I'm sorry. That's probably really impolite, but
yeah,
Yeah.
but at the end of the movie, he like was cool. Like they
Yeah.
like it was all an act. So Scary Movie picked up on that. So
Yeah.
I like the idea that Dewey was just doing an act. But I'm really glad though that Dewey was who he said he was.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
didn't want to like a bait and switch type of thing where Dewey being all like cute and lovable and dorky turns out to be just an act. But I don't think, but honestly though, given that his sister was Tatum and like Sydney knew the family that well, it wouldn't have worked because that means he would have been doing this his whole life, and that means the cool version of him would have been the act in the end, then being like, I'm gonna snap out of this, and I've been just like practicing being cool for so long by watching my sister's friend. And then, so like, I mean, like he like turns into like he like center parts his hair and he's like, I'm gonna be the new Skeet Ulrich Billy. Like I'm the cool guy now. So I mean that could have, I mean, but then that's kind of like well, I mean, spoilers to other movie, like what kind of like what Valentine's Day or Valentine's that movie did,
Mhm.
where you have a dorky who is cool type
Yeah.
of thing in a different sort of way. So I don't know, but I appreciate that. I love all the characters in this
Well,
movie a lot.
And I gotta say, watching it this time, I had this like Gail Weathers. So Sydney, we're all like, "Oh, Sydney, she's our favorite shit," but she doesn't like horror movies. The funny thing is, she calls them dumb, but yet falls for all the tropes she makes fun of them for. Runs up the stairs. She is convinced about her cotton weary thing, and Gail's a bitch. Da, da. Gail is actually a seeker of justice in this one. Like Gail's right. Gail is on the money, and Sydney like treats her. She punches her. She's like, and Gail only doesn't like Sydney because Sydney's wrong
Yeah.
in her eyes. And it's crazy that this dichotomy where we have to reverse it in the next one, where she kind of has a bit of the person she's accused of being in this one. But I was watching this time like, yeah, Gail's right about everything, and she's convicted, and like she does have that point with her cameraman where he's like, do you realize an innocent man? Da-da. He's like, oh my gosh. She goes, do you know what that could do for my ratings or whatever? He's like, so there is a bit of that bug there, but she's actually seeking she's actually got the truth. The lying journalist is the truthful one, and Sydney is 100% convinced on a lie, or her conviction is to a lie.
This might be controversial, but I don't know. Now that I've seen everything so much, and I love Sydney, don't get me wrong, but I do think, to me, like overall, and even rewatching the first one and the second one and all of them, Gail really is the more dynamic, interesting character. Just because of like the journey that she goes on, her inability to admit when she's wrong, but then when she does admit, like when she is open to changing and she goes through such a journey. Sydney, you just have to like feel bad for, because she's getting so much shit thrown at her all the time that like it's hard to like sit there and say, well, we like Gail more. It's like, well, Gail's not really struggling the same way that Sydney is, but as a character, I think Gail is just a stronger character. But Sydney's just badass in the way that she's been, having her life threatened for so many years and still manages to wake up and keep going.
Yeah.
But you see more of an evolution with Gail, I think, the way they handle it. And
they've given Gail more interesting background stuff that's happened between movies than any of the other returning characters. Like, it's like, where is she at now between these? Oh, and now like interesting stuff's happened. Who's she become? Is she going to be this trustworthy person? Like, there's always a question of like, who we getting here for the first act of the movie before Gail goes, okay, guys, let's team up, like that's like, who are we getting here a lot of the time? But
in the first movie, is the timeline correct that it's the 1-year anniversary since her mom's brutal murder, which means that not only did we already
since Roman Bridger left Woodsboro,
since the there was a court, a trial, and a book already came out all within 1 year. Because the murder happened, had to go to court, had to go to trial,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and she wrote the book.
Oh, he was awaiting trial.
it
He
came-
hadn't been he hadn't had trial yet. He was awaiting
Okay.
trial. Yeah.
Okay.
Or something.
Because I thought she was in trial. You said
No,
you saw
she
him,
yeah.
someone leaving his coat or someone leaving wearing his coat.
Yeah, you testify. Yeah. So no, she did testify.
But maybe, but anyway, it's just like that's a lot in 1 year. Also, how does a high schooler get away with murder so easy that he was able to frame one person? Unless it's just because of Sydney.
It's the
She's
90s.
the-
Yeah.
yeah,
She was
I'm
no
overthinking this.
The 90s.
The 90s
a
was
lot of
trial
weird-
city. If you had a
Yeah.
trial, oh yeah.
Yeah, it
The
was
trial.
the 90s. You got away with a lot. I feel like it took but trials took a long time. So yeah, I guess that is a weird thing. I mean, but in movies and TV, court is never really, even though like aspects can be realistic,
Mhm.
they expedite that process so quickly that
Yeah.
is never true in real life, because they would need to. So I guess I'm more forgiving of the fact that he was able to frame somebody, especially in the 90s. And I think just for the sake of a movie, they expedited it, but in reality, it probably would have been like the 3-year anniversary of
Right.
the before there was actually some
Right.
resolve.
I
to
never
the
thought of it.
story.
That's one thing of questioning reality I've never thought of with this before.
Well, that and was
Yeah.
Stu involved in the beginning to kill her mom? Or
Yes.
is it only
Yep. Stu is involved.
okay? I still
Bec-
don't understand why Stu got involved except peer pressure.
Scapegoat. Oh yeah, true.
But like, why did he really want to kill people? And I guess they talk about that in the very beginning when they're like, "Didn't Casey break up with you?" And it's like, "No, I broke up with her."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that about, again, with Stu, that he was kind of unhinged and he was perceptive to Billy's mastermind
Mhm.
ways, because that's believable. Like there are people, I mean, there are people who idolize serial killers in real life who probably would do their bidding if they did it. So like Stu is a genuinely believable character, even if his motive was peer pressure, because peer pressure is a legitimate motive.
That's
Like it
true.
is especially for teenagers.
true.
Like do
Well-
drugs, kill that person. Okay, like
Have you ever seen Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer?
Yes.
It's kind of like that. So it's Michael Rooker. This was his breakout role. Was he plays this serial killer guy who's like a janitor at places, and he moves in with this guy, and the guy like catches him doing it or something. Well, I haven't seen it in years, but like he ends up like wanting to hop on board and kill people with him. They do it together for a bit. But so there's that.
So Stu's, I'm going to go ahead and blame Stu's parents for why he wanted to jump on board. Because if there's a curfew and a murder going on around town, why didn't his parents come home? Where the heck are all the parents? That's
Yeah,
Stu's problem.
that's
Mhm.
true with most teen movies, though. Let's just be real. Like parents just don't, especially TV nowadays and like TV shows, like parents just don't exist in things. For most of the
Right.
reasons. Which, to be fair, the Scream TV show kind of like had element, I think, because it had more time to expand on it. You
Mhm.
got to know people's parents a little bit
Well, yeah.
better.
Mhm.
In movies, you don't really have that luxury because people will be annoyed.
And do you
but-
want to?
Yeah.
Meh.
Well, okay. And to play devil's advocate, like, not to overshare about my child, but like, but like, my parents were very busy people, and I was responsible, and I got straight A's, and I had an older brother who was not as responsible and got himself into trouble. And he put me around some of that trouble as a child, that my parents were never aware of. And I got away with some stuff when I was young as well. So I feel like, given the span that this movie took place in, I believe that the parents might not be around as much, or like be busy or doing what
Yeah.
they're doing, because there are certain weeks in my childhood where I'm like, oh, I can't believe all that happened in 1 week and no one knew how. Like, I was just not stupid about what I did, and I maintained good grades and all that to kind of have some of those freedoms. And I feel like in this group of people, they were generally like good in school. They weren't troublemakers per se. They weren't really doing anything to have red flags with their teachers or professors. The parents kind of didn't need to be overly around. And back in the 90s, parents kind of just let kids wander the streets and like ride their bikes and do things
Yeah.
a little bit more now. So watching these movies with like, or younger generations watching these movies, it might feel very foreign to them on the way kids behaved, but let's go back in time, and that's kind of what kids behaved like. They had those luxuries on, like they weren't actively doing drugs in this movie. They weren't, I mean, and Sydney was clearly okay, where she was just like, I'm going to show you my boobs. Like, if that's really the worst thing she's doing, why would her parents think to be like, oh,
Right.
be afraid of all of this? So
Her
I
mom's dead, Greg.
think a parent, excuse
I know
me.
where
And her
she's
dad
at.
is missing, and she doesn't seem to care about that either. We can't get a hold
Well,
of
I
her.
know the dad's
That's
missing,
fine.
but
He's
but
in the
here's
closet
thing, though.
listening to me and Billy have
Well,
sex.
as we found out in Urban Legend, you could be on a ski trip with his bros.
Exactly. Well, but again, the mom we clearly knew, or else there wouldn't have been a story because
Yeah.
she's dead. That's the whole point. But the dad, there was kind of that whole, he's going out of town. It was already set up, and she was in high school. My parents went out of town before, like especially when I was in high school and they were divorced. Like they went out of town, and I would be on my own for a few days. Like that wasn't weird. That's not a foreign concept to me.
Yeah.
So I never really questioned anything like that. Stuff I do question is the lack of teachers in schools. And this one, a lot of stuff happened outside of the school. But like when you watch teen movies and kids doing stuff at school, I'm like, no, that would not happen. Like, where are the how are kids running on stage doing these theater shows, doing X, Y, and Z? That wouldn't happen. But parents not being present as much, it's believable unless the kids gave them a reason to need to latch on and like put a leash on them. So
Yeah.
yeah, anyway.
Gotcha. We've gone through but we haven't talked about Randy a bit. The I Feel Seen character for this movie at the time. But this is as good as it gets for Jamie Kennedy. Scream and Scream, like there's I can't think of something he did where I'm like, oh yeah, Jamie Kennedy. Even though he's still around. Oh, he did give us like the greatest New Year's Eve show of all time. I believe it was the KTLA one from 2013 or something. Look it up. Look up the highlights.
I'm trying to think what he was in with Swartzen when he's
It's
like
a
the white boy in
disaster.
Hollywood. Like, don't be hating. He just kept saying
Wait, he
that.
had a TV show, the Jamie Kennedy Experiment.
Yes, he did have that.
I remember that for some reason.
He
Yeah.
hunts UFOs, or he did with Jack Osborne. That was kind of interesting to see.
It was a 2012 into 2013 New Year's Eve special, KDOC, and it is like on air cussing that happens on accident, and he's talking to a woman. He's like, is that true? He's like, you know what they say, about once you go black, and he's like, yeah. He's like, you know what? He's like, you know what they say about white? And she's like, what? He's like, you'll still be tight. Is like on the air because he's drunk as shit. Like everybody, Bone Thugs and Harmony singing uncensored songs. Like it is. Watch the highlights. I watched the whole thing when I heard about it when it first happened. It's a mess and it's beautiful. That and the two screams, I'll give Jamie Kennedy.
But what about Tremors 5?
I
He
did
was in-
watch Tremors 5 and 6, or he's in 2 of them. He got to come back.
Yeah,
did-
I'm looking him up right now.
He
to
got
just-
replaced by John Heater in the last one they did.
Malibu's Most Wanted.
That
what I
was it.
thinking of. That was a
Yep.
good one.
There we
Well,
go.
it was fine. It's like, don't be hating. So
I remember that.
Gosh, that's funny. Tremors 5.
Tremors 5 and 6.
5.
And 6.
And
He did,
6.
yep. And then then when you're replaced by John Heater, it's
Oh my goodness.
it's telling you something. And then Drew Barrymore. Did you know she was like? Did it surprise you when she bit it when you saw it the first time in the
Yeah?
opening? Like I was like, oh, I thought she was gonna be in this movie more. I
Did
didn't know
they
it.
promote it was like starring Drew Barrymore, or I don't remember
Yeah.
the trailer. I guess I have to check it out again.
Yeah.
I was too young, I think, to really pick up on how significant that moment was, other than feeling like I got a complete movie within that like 10-minute scene.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't really think otherwise about the cultural impact of what that was at the time, as an 11-year-old, 10-year-old.
Janet Leigh of the 90s.
11-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have been 10, 96, so 10, 11. That was
Okay.
my, and yeah, I didn't know about marketing, and I think I knew what Psycho was, but I don't think it would what I don't think I had seen it yet
Gotcha.
at the time. So yeah, I didn't, and the poster of her being on it, I don't think I was as aware of what that meant with like a name on a box and all of that, because wasn't like Drew Barrymore, because it was Ann Skeet Ulrich on the poster. I think it wasn't like Ann
yeah.
Barrymore. So I don't think I paid enough attention when I first saw it, other than I know people at my elementary school were talking about it. And I hadn't seen it yet because some of them got to see it in theaters, and I was really sad. So I like made a big fuss that I could see it. So it was more of me wanting to see it to be cool, and not for the idea that I didn't know who Drew Barrymore was. I think even enough to like say she's a star. I don't think this cast was recognizable enough to me as an like 10, 11-year-old.
This was her coming right out of her bad girl phase. So this like set her off through like a new wave of like wedding singer and like never been kissed and all
Because it's
sorts of stuff.
after Boys on the Side, I think,
There's stuff
right?
that, yeah, because she had done like Poison Ivy and like, and
Oh,
she was
yeah.
doing the Letterman thing where she was flashing him, and like she was going through her little like bad girl phase that people are like, Drew Barrymore. Oh. And yeah, and then this kind of like whoosh, a whole new thing with it.
And and this shows how talented of an actress she genuinely is.
Yeah.
Because she does so much with such a like with one scene that could go off the rails very easily in the wrong hands. Like it's written well, of course, but it could be very gimmicky, or it could feel forced, or it could feel unnatural. And Drew Barrymore, you believe every second of it. You believe she is this innocent girl who's just at home. And again, back then in the 90s, getting a strange phone call like that wouldn't be that off kilter. Like it would have been like, this is kind of weird, but like that's just what happened.
Yeah.
So not strange to me. And yeah, not strange to me at all. So she's really a talented actress, and I think I went back and like retroactively learned more about her because of this movie.
Gotcha.
And found out she was a star, but it wasn't until I was older and actually dove into horror because of this movie that I really learned how much of an impact this movie had.
And speaking of, again, I gotta give kudos to Patrick Lussier. The editing, this movie cooks. Like, is a quick watch. Like, you're already in no time. You're at Stu's house with the party. Like, and he does the clever things of the cutting back really well between the delay scenes and stuff. Like, he's really, really good. This movie. It's an excellent edit. Yeah, any kills that, what do you think of the kills in Scream? Are they effective? I know Drew Barrymore's is like the difference in the unrated version and the theatrical was they show her insides and Steve's insides a little longer, but that's really the biggest difference of them. Which it had an X rating when it first.
Really?
Yeah.
Which it never intended to show him that way. Wes Craven always overdoes his gore for the first cut so that he'll get what he actually wants when he cuts it down. So then they'll watch again. Oh, okay, you made the cuts. R.
Yeah.
So he would always do that with his movies. He would always overdo to excessive degrees so he could get, when he cut the thing he wanted to cut, he'd have no problems. So
I think Stu's death was kind of like traumatizing. I don't know why. Maybe it's just funny because it was leading up to it, and then you're like, I kind of thought he was going to get away. Like somehow he would survive because Billy's cutting the crap out of him, stabbing him, making him woozy. But then again, the doggy door thing just like blew my mind.
Yeah.
So that was like, oh god, that could happen. Yeah.
Not many people. Well, this doesn't have a massive kill count when you think of it, because it all kind of happens all at once. So like, I mean, really, you can only think of like Casey's death, dog door death, and Stu with a TV on his head. Right. Otherwise, they're just kind of like
bullet in the head for Billy. I mean, there's the gutting in the opening scene, which doesn't really tell the tale of what the deaths will look like the rest of the movie.
No.
But it's kind of the message kills to the rest of the community. Like, I'm a sick motherfucker. Don't mess with me. I will say the thing it does is I was shocked when Sydney gets attacked so early in like a genuine scene, which in the plot of things was never meant, they were never going to kill her in that. They just needed her. They needed Billy to get caught at that scene to take him out of the suspects list.
Like they
True.
really planned it.
Mhm.
However,
They really
because
did.
of her house logistics, I still do this because I have a bathroom door that opens up in front of the garage entry door.
Mhm.
I always leave it open at night. It's deadlocked, but just in case that deadlock opens, the door is going to jam into the other
Right.
door and no one's going to get in here, Billy. Or
Well,
whoever.
and Stu's calling from home or out with Rose McGowan to take him off the list because she goes, "What am I doing, huh? What am I doing?" And he's not, and he doesn't say like he does the
Wow.
others. So
You know what? I never realized. I think I thought about it before, but I couldn't figure out who did what kills. And you can probably
Mhm.
just narrow it down, but
You
and I'm sure
can,
people
you
have,
can
but-
pretty easily.
it's
I
both
mean,
of them in the opening scene.
Yeah, both definitely did. There is a YouTuber who did a full on like diagram of the house and like actually had like digital markers showing like the path that each killer would have walked and like ran in order to
Mhm.
like cut off Casey. And I mean, people have spent a lot of time
I think
analyzing
what
who-
Billy
God
Billy
bless them.
killed Tatum, right?
Billy,
How-
yes.
Billy
Yeah,
kills Tatum.
Oh, so Stu would have killed the new
Stu
boyfriend.
Stu kills Tatum in the garage. That's Billy, and then Stu I think is the news van guy, and
Yep.
Billy.
And Steve on the patio, right?
Steve
or
on the
whatever Casey's boyfriend was. when
I
gets
don't know
fired.
who's doing what there because they're both at the door. Because remember, well, I don't know who's at the patio. Because remember, what door am I at? They're both at a door. So no
Yeah.
matter which one she picks, he's gonna be there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I can't tell the first one, but I think that's how it goes. I don't know who stabs. I think Stu stabs Dewey.
Oh, wait, you know what? The way you're supposed to determine it is who does what is based on how they handle the knife, because both killers do different things with their knife after a
Mm.
kill. And that is the tell. And Stu was the wiping of the blood off.
Which
Oh.
carries on through every movie. That's like the
Which-
signature.
well, they do.
Gophus.
Well, no, but that's the nod to that. But the original movie, I do remember seeing
Hmm.
something where both. But if you notice in every movie, though, the ghost face, except for the third one, the two ghost face always do something different. Whether
Okay.
it's repeating what Stu did or an alternative one, but you can figure out who who does what based on. You don't know necessarily who's doing the wiping or doing the other, but you know that like it's a different killer based on how they do the knife
Gotcha.
thing. They
See,
don't.
this is
both-
how ADHD I am. Even when I watch it, I'm trying to pay attention to those things. I just get into the movie and I forget what I'm even paying attention for. I'm like, oh
Same.
crap, what happened?
I
Dang
do
it.
love in Scream 5, the fifth one, when we get there, like how they shoot the two killers is awesome. That I like because it does stuff that Scream 4 should have done but didn't. But they know now in 5 to do stuff. But I guess we'll get there.
Yeah, and Scream 4 does some other things that are kind of genius, to be fair. Like they may have lacked in that, but they did some genius stuff in 4 that I've only picked up on. The more I appreciate what they did in 4. Anyways,
Gotcha.
but we're not there
Yes,
yet.
we're not there yet. So
Yeah,
one thing I want to bring up before we end with all these, the soundtrack. Scream always has killer soundtracks or whatever the main song that gets introduced here and carries on is Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
Yes, I love it, love it, love it. I remember when I started watching Peaky Blinders. I'm like, why do I know this song? Why do I know this song?
And
It's because it's been in my head since I was a freaking kid.
last year's Lost City with Sandra Bullock, Brad Pitt scene
Yes.
where he goes sneaking around that base is that same song. The classic jam, School's Out by Alice Cooper's in here. They have Drop Dead Gorgeous by Republica. You remember Baby I'm Ready to Go? Well, they had a song in Scream. Wasn't just Baby I'm... Yeah, so Moby has a song called First Cool Hive. Youth of America by Birdbrain, and then over the credits, Whisper to a Scream Soho is our first roll call credits. I love the roll call credits with Scream. It's like, hey, we're okay. Remember we had fun? I got killed. I got killed. I was the killer. Like I love the roll call. It's not Scream without the roll call. It's the best thing to have those in the credits. So definitely. But yeah, Scream, I still, it holds up. I know this era starts here and it lives long enough to see it become the enemy, because this is what people were liking with horror. They were going to these and then all of a sudden they didn't like them. And then when the remake craze and the J horror and the Saw, like they call it torture porn, it's really not fucking torture porn, folks. that's a bad term for that, but it would get kind of like, oh, I'm glad we're out of that. But it's like, yeah, people were kind of liking it too. But I guess everything has to evolve somehow. But there was like a harsh blowback on it that I don't think was necessary. And I don't like, no, it's just we needed to move on to something. It wasn't that people weren't liking it, but people don't like clever things sometimes, as I've found. But yeah, so that'll do. Scream. We'll put a bullet to the head, Dewey, head. For this entry in the Scream franchise. Till next time, where can people find you at, Greg?
You can find me on all social media platforms at the McGoonies. So there you go. I mostly use Instagram. But you can try to message me on any platform and I'll eventually get to it.
All right, Jessica.
On Instagram at Jessica Alsman and Twitter at J&Alsman. And I'm going to share my photos that I had with Nev Campbell, Mr. Skeet. Is it Ulrich?
Ulrich. I think Ulrich. Oh, yeah, Ulrich.
And it was Nev Skeet and Matthew Lillard. And the first time I actually got to get a picture with Matthew Lillard, I did not smile good. Does that make sense? I freaked out.
Yes.
I was a little kid, just like,
Yeah.
You needed
That was the
retakes on
photo.
picture day.
it was ridiculous.
Excellent. Okay. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at BraveWorkUHD, written work at whysoblue.com. Next time we move on to 1997 Scream 2, which my personal favorite of them. So till then, stay fun positive.
Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios and no infringement is intended. Additional information on this and other episodes at BrandonPetersShow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail at BrandonPetersShow.com. The show is available on Apple Music, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.